All right, music fans, welcome back. It is Dave, the real music observer, observing real music in real time for real people, just like you right there, and yours truly right here. Okay, so this video is going to be rather interesting. I found this podcast that was recently done. This guy, Paul Taylor, who was in Winger and a couple of other real important bands, and even more importantly, worked with Steve Perry during the entire For the Love of Strange Medicine period of time, both album and tour. He and Perry and Lincoln Brewster were writing partners for that album. Apparently the album took almost 3 years to complete. And the touring, which Taylor said took a lot out of Perry. In fact, at one point, Perry had really bad bronchitis and had to kind of say no more. So Perry was suffering here trying to tour and trying to just get his voice to a place where he could perform live. Now, there were a lot of live performances prior to that period, so Paul Taylor makes a point of saying, hey, this was pretty cool working with Perry. The original video was talking about how Taylor got to work with Perry and it was a joy and so forth, but it sounds as though Perry was a bit of a taskmaster and a perfectionist, and I would expect no less from Perry, who doesn't want to rush anything, and that pattern would continue on. But here's the real blockbuster part of this podcast, where Paul Taylor says, hey, Steve Perry owed Columbia Records another Journey album. Okay, so I speculated on this last summer. I kind of got beat up a little bit on various social media platforms. Now you've got Paul Taylor saying this out loud in an interview. All right, and the only reason he knows this is because he spent 3 years with Perry. I'm sure Perry probably said, yeah, at some point I've got to go back. And it's been made out all along. We didn't hear that in Jonathan Cain's blockbuster book, okay? We didn't hear anything about that. And it's kind of odd because you think you'd put that detail in there that, yeah, Journey owed the record label another album with Steve Perry, okay? So once that album was done, and that was Trial by Fire, Perry, I guess, probably thought to himself, I'm done. I don't need to tour, and he had difficulty touring a couple years before that. And yes, we all know about the world-famous hike in Hawaii, the acute pain. It's a story I do believe, but it's also a story to me that seems a little embellished. It seems a little more dramatic than it probably was. I'm not saying Perry wasn't in rough condition. I'm not saying they didn't have to ice him down and so forth during the video shoots, because that's well documented, although it's been repeated a lot. So I'm not 100% sure of how bad that was compared to the way it was explained. Okay, it may have been exactly the way it was explained, but there's a part of me that believes that, look, why go in there and do a video then? Why even bother with it? And it was all done, I think, to make the other guys see that, hey, I'm in just tremendous pain here and I can't go on. Perry, okay, was then given ultimatums by the rest of the band, basically Cain and Sean, hey, get off the pot, let's get this surgery so we can go out on tour. And Perry makes this excuse, it's my body, it's a personal decision and so forth, which I get that. But there's a part of me that wonders if you were really into resurrecting this band. Now, I've speculated that, because Perry made the phone call, that he was the guy that initiated all this, so why would he just, abandon the whole thing? Because the phone call was made probably because Perry knew that these guys were going to eventually ask him and say, hey, we need another album. You guys owe us another album. And that may have hurt Perry financially. It may have hurt the rest of the guys financially to not deliver on that album and to break a record contract that you had, okay? And all of the future royalties and publishing and all of that stuff may have been affected by that. We just don't know. We weren't there. But the fact that Taylor says Perry owed the label another Journey album. So he makes the phone call. He initiates that phone call. But then the hip thing, it all collapses. The other guys are left to kind of figure out what they're going to do. Unless they weren't privy to any of this, they had to have known that, yes, the label wanted another Journey record. And they got the Journey record. They got Trial by Fire, but they didn't get the tour. There probably was no agreement that they had to go on tour afterward. Typically, that's always the way it used to work in the record business. So Perry, for the last 20 years, hasn't been interested in touring or really music, coming out with new music at all. I mean, with that one tune that he did with David Foster, that was it. That was his swan song, and I think it had a message in there. I Stand Alone. I think it had a message in there at that point. I think Perry said, this is all I have to do. This is what I'm under contract to do. Yes, the hip thing may have been a condition that he knew about prior to this hike out in Hawaii. We will never know. And if he took that hike and he did that and it exasperated his problem, to give this whole thing more of credence, because people do fake things all the time. I'm not saying Perry's faking it. I'm saying it's convenient. It comes along at a time where it looks as though Journey's about to go full steam ahead and the whole thing shuts down. So I think that this kind of proves that this album, Trial by Fire, was done because there was a contract that had to be fulfilled, and that contract was fulfilled. And then Perry probably went back to the label at that point and said, I've done what you guys wanted me to do. I quit. Okay, these guys can go on without me, but if they do go on without me, there are going to be consequences. I don't think Perry would have come back and done a tour even if he felt better. They tried to accommodate him. They said, you can sit in the stool. Phil Collins is doing that right now, and the fans are loving it because they get to see Phil Collins. He's a legend, and I think Perry, who is probably in better physical shape than Phil Collins right now, could certainly sit in a stool and perform music live, and I think fans would show up to see it. The question is, does Perry actually want to do it? I don't think he does. All right, that's my video. I'm done. I think this is kind of big news, but maybe for some folks, it's already, we already knew. All right, I'll be back soon. See you then.